Hello and welcome to another episode of the Under the Dome podcast, a Notre Dame athletics podcast presented by the Loop Sports. We are back and we are better than ever, and it is April Fool's Day, but one thing we're not fooling around about is the fact that Notre Dame is in spring practice and spring practice is in full swing. I personally am excited because I'm not a baseball guy, but I'm excited about the warm weather that's hopefully coming to the Midwest over the next couple weeks, and the fact that hopefully it really will indeed feel like spring at some point, and just the fact that now there's Notre Dame football stuff to talk about, write about, and all of that stuff. Make sure you're checking out the Under the Dome podcast. If you are looking for the podcast Twitter, I've kind of rearranged things. You can still find the podcast Twitter at underthedome_ND. If you're looking for me, I'm your host, Ben Belden. You can find me on Twitter at RealBBelden. If you're watching this video on YouTube or whatever, you can see all of that stuff is on the screen for you. And make sure you're checking us out all across the web. We're wherever your podcasts are found, wherever your preferred platform is. Go check us out there and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We're going to do some cool stuff with that as especially the season gets closer and during the season as well. So all of that stuff out of the way, I want to bring in my co-host, and that is Mason Plummer. Mason, how are you, man?
Doing great. How you doing, Ben?
I am doing well. I'm excited. I'm excited to get in a groove, I guess, with this podcast now. One thing that I haven't, I guess, told the listeners yet is that Mason's going to be a regular guest now on the podcast, so get used to hearing his voice. Excited to kind of have him and his insights as, Mason, pursues a journalism degree at Ball State. You are studying journalism, not English or anything like that, right, Mason?
Yeah, journalism with a focus in news. So I'm in the Sports Link program here and working with ESPN3 and that kind of thing, while also covering football and basketball, pretty much anything at Slap the Sign, as well as covering Chelsea FC. They're the soccer team out of London, England, for Fansided as well. So kind of keeping myself everywhere, keeping all my bases covered at this point.
Good stuff, and adding to that resume, obviously, as well. So that's good. So, okay, before I get started, I want to quickly get a couple of administrative things out of the way. The first one being our little partnership with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a ticket search engine that never loses sight of the fan experience. Simply go to their website, type in the name of a team, and choose the date you're looking to attend. SeatGeek will present you with a graphic chart of the stadium, where you can then choose your seats and tickets based on a score system that determines the best value. If you've never used SeatGeek before, we've partnered with them to give you a great deal. Apply the coupon code TheLoopSports, that is all one word, TheLoopSports, just how it sounds, at checkout to take $20 off your first purchase with SeatGeek. A $50 night for two at the ballpark then comes to $30, or if you're going by yourself, a $23 trip turns into just $3 with the coupon code TheLoopSports. So you really have no excuse to not go out and root for your favorite team at this point. So just apply the code, and like I say, that is TheLoopSports at checkout. And thank you to SeatGeek for partnering with us on this podcast. If you haven't figured it out yet, we are partnered with The Loop Sports. Make sure you check them out, theloopsports.com. They're a Chicago-based website. They cover everything: Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Bears, Bulls, all of that stuff. And it's a really good website that we're happy to have a partnership with. So if you're a Chicago sports fan, and Mason, I guess you are, right? Make sure we're checking out theloopsports.com, and that is at theloop_sports on Twitter. So that administrative stuff out of the way, Mason, let's get to some Notre Dame football stuff. I went on a show in Mississippi the other day, did a little radio spot, and I kind of, some of these topics, I guess, are, I don't know, taken from what I talked about on that particular show. Shout out to Jake for having me on there. But anyway, I don't know. I guess I want to start with a topic that I guess I was asked about to a certain degree, and just something that I didn't get to talk about on the last podcast that I recorded. Since we last recorded, a couple weeks ago, Vegas came out with their over-under for win projections for all of the college sports teams, and it went about as you would expect. And for Notre Dame, Vegas came out with a 9.5 over-under for wins on the regular season for Notre Dame. So this only includes the first 12. A bowl game does not kind of factor into that decision. So I was also asked, if Notre Dame is at a college football playoff or bust type of mentality. And so together, Mason, I kind of want to just get your thoughts on, first of all, that number, that 9.5 number, whether you think that, Notre Dame's, you can give your pick over or under, and then just sort of weigh in, I guess, whether you think Notre Dame is at a place where it is college football playoff or bust, or if we're just not quite there yet.
All right, so starting with the Vegas line at 9.5, I think that's just about perfect considering the talent drain from especially the defensive side. Losing Dexter Williams and Miles Boykin on the offensive side hurts, but more importantly, losing Tavon Coney, Drew Tranquill, Jerry Tillery, Julian Love. I mean, that's a serious talent drain from a great defense from last season, and there's still a great defense returning, but with that much of a talent drain and Notre Dame's not recruiting at the levels of Clemson and Alabama at the moment, I think 9.5 just about right. That leaves them with inevitably losing to one of a tough schedule of Georgia, Michigan, Stanford. There's tough games at Virginia and Virginia Tech as well. So I've been debating within myself and with my friends as well, the Notre Dame fans, at 9 or 10 wins, and I think that's just about fair. I could see it going 9 or 10, really. And to answer your question about playoff or bust, Notre Dame's really in a spot where it has to go undefeated or go 11-1 with some luck. And really, after their showing against Clemson, after going undefeated, people seem to remember that Notre Dame lost or got destroyed by Clemson really much more than they remember Clemson destroying Alabama, which seems to be just correlated to the fact that Notre Dame in their most recent big game also got destroyed by Alabama and Ohio State in their most recent big bowl games. And so that stays in the minds of the committee. It stays in the minds of other fans. And, it's easy as Notre Dame fans to kind of blow that away. But, it's going to be tough to get back into the playoff. And maybe as fans, we expect it to be playoff or bust. But with the current team, I think they're maybe a year or two away from contending for a playoff spot again.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with most of what you just said there. I've been pretty vocal on, in what I guess I wrote this, but I've also said it on the podcast that I think that right now where we sit, and I say we as Notre Dame fans, I think right now where Notre Dame sits is really the best place that Notre Dame has been in for quite some time, because if you look at the trajectory of Brian Kelly-led teams, he seems to do well in year 3 quite often. He did well in year 3 at Central Michigan. He did well in year 3 at Cincinnati. He did well in year 3 at Notre Dame, where he took them to the college football national championship game. I almost said the college football playoff. And even though those things didn't really work out at the time, I think that like I say, he's done well in year 3. And to me, I know that he's not actually in year 3, but to me, he's almost in year 3 at Notre Dame the second time around, the way that he, after 4-8, stripped the coaching staff down. And really, it seems like to a large extent, Notre Dame was, torn down to the studs, I suppose. And I think that right now what we're seeing from Notre Dame, and I hope I'm right about this, but it just seems that Notre Dame is starting to develop a depth that they haven't had, that I can remember in all of the years that I remember, watching Notre Dame football and following the team relatively closely. Certainly whenever I was a little kid, I wasn't following the two deep quite as well as, I am now. But to me, I just don't remember a time, outside of Notre Dame heyday, way back in the Lou Holtz days, where, you could look across the defensive line, I suppose, and see that, there are, we've got, especially at the defensive end position, we've got a 3 deep at both of the defensive end positions that a lot of teams would die for, and, I think that Notre Dame's getting close to a college football playoff or bust mentality, because it's getting to a point where, we hear things about Ovie Agufo, who is, going to be a freshman at Notre Dame and going to be a great defensive end, but he's probably not going to see the field because they've got Dalen Hayes and they've got in front of him Julian Okwara. So, hearing that type of thing, hearing stuff about how backups are flashing and playing well and are going to challenge starting type guys for positions, that's something I don't necessarily remember as far as, covering Notre Dame football over the last few years. So When it comes to 9.5, I think I'm going to take the over on 9.5. Although I think that number is a fair number. I think, 10-2, 11-1 is in the cards. And, you mentioned it. At Georgia is going to be difficult. At Michigan is going to be difficult. Virginia Tech's not going to be a slouch. At Duke is going to be difficult. Sandwich in between Virginia Tech and Navy. At Stanford is going to be difficult. But I think that, this Notre Dame offense is going to be better. I think if they figure out the linebacking situation, the defense will be able to be as good. Maybe not in week 1, but they don't face Georgia until week 4 of the regular season. So, hopefully they have some answers by then. But long-winded answers that I think, we're looking at a 10 or 11 win year this year, and I guess we'll just sort of see. But some things are going to have to happen for that to transpire. I don't know if you have any. I just talked for a long time, but I don't know if you have any reaction to things I just said or not. If you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think in spots the depth is better than we've seen. Obviously, I wasn't around for the Lou Holtz days. I'm still relatively young, being only 19. Watching this Notre Dame team and really studying, really paying attention just the past 3 or 4 years, as you said, into like the 2 or 3 deep and really knowing the guys that are on the roster. There's really impressive depth at safety, and that's going to be around for a while with Jalen Elliott and Lohi Gilman, both returning as probable captains and starters. And then you have guys like Kyle Hamilton and just big guys like Derek Allen too behind them that are more than capable of filling a spot if they need to. And you also have impressive depth, as you said, at defensive end. But then you also see lacking depth at, I shouldn't say lacking depth, but lacking experience at linebacker when you're such a big talent drain at linebacker. And it makes you worry a little bit because you're really relying on some guys like Jack Lamb and Shane Simon to really break out this year. And if that doesn't happen, you could see this Notre Dame team drop down to an 8-4 or 9-3 type of year.
Yeah, if there's any major area of concern, it's definitely at linebacker position. And I think that, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I guess what I would say though is that, sitting here in April, I think it's hard to kind of tell because, obviously with Tavon Coney and Drew Tranquill, like those two guys never left the field last year for the most part. And anytime you lose 2 linebackers like that, then it's going to be difficult for the defense to play the same way. But I don't know. Like I think to the fact that how many times have we looked at certain positions as an area of concern? Like, did we know last year sitting at before this, before the season that the defensive line was going to be as good? I certainly didn't. I don't know. So I guess what I'm saying here is like, I think you're spot on about being concerned about the linebacker situation because any reasonable person would. However, I don't necessarily know that, we won't be surprised in a pleasant way. Now, I guess the flip side of that coin is that it could be worse than we think. I think one encouraging thing, I guess, that I've heard as, spring practice has started to get in a full swing here is that it seems like Asmar Bilal is the one guy that it seems like the coaching staff is pretty confident in moving inside after playing the rover position, kind of a la Drew Tranquill the year before, but certainly not the same type of player that Drew Tranquill is. But I don't know, like, is having Asmar Bilal your one staple linebacker a good or a bad thing? Like, does that mean Asmar Bilal has been playing well, or does that just mean like he's the only one with any type of experience, so he has to be the one guy that you're feeling the air quotes best about? I don't know. So it's definitely an area of concern. And like I say, Georgia is week 4. Notre Dame will have played 2 games before that, before getting a bye week. But with a bye week mixed in, I guess I should stay. But I don't know. That linebacking core, I guess, has me concerned, kind of like you alluded to as well. Is there anything that, okay, so say, let's exclude the linebackers from this talk real quick before we kind of transition to talking about something else. For Notre Dame to go 12-0 this season, what has to happen? What guys, from your perspective, on that, or maybe have been a little bit under the radar, we're down the depth chart type of a situation, what guys have to step into the spotlight and perform well for Notre Dame to repeat, have the type of regular season that they had last year?
All right, I'm gonna list off a couple guys if that's all right.
Yep.
This has been something that's been kind of lingering in my mind, thinking about like, cause as you said, there was guys that really impressed last season that we didn't think would, which really ultimately helped Notre Dame to get to 12-0 and a playoff berth. I think really you're gonna need absolutely great production. While replacing Jerry Tillery in the defensive tackle position with Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa. He suffered a broken foot last year and really didn't get to play all that much, but you're going to need great production from him. And Notre Dame coaches are really confident in the guys underneath him, but as a starter, as a junior, you're going to need a big year from, as they call him, MTA. Jason Ademilola behind him, you're going to need solid production from him as well. And then I think even at the 3 deep, you're going to need either Hunter Spears or Howard Cross III to really find themselves and make themselves known in the defensive tackle position, as well as somebody at the nose guard position, whether that's Kurt Heinisch or Jacob Lacey. The coaches have had nothing but great things to say about Jacob Lacey so far in spring practice, and it shouldn't really surprise anybody if he comes and takes the spot from Kurt Heinisch, who hasn't been really that impressive, considering Lacey's a freshman and is almost bigger than Heinisch and seems to really be hungry for that starting spot.
I'm going to narrow it down, I guess, and it's kind of interesting, I guess, that we're both focusing on defense. We really haven't even talked about the offensive side of the ball, but I think that sort of speaks to the level of confidence that probably both of us have, and maybe we can touch on the offensive side here in a little bit. But I'm going to say that I'm going to narrow it down to one guy. You kind of went with the defensive line, which, I agree with. Got to get guys to fill that Jerry Tillery spot and also establish some depth. But I'm going to go to another level of the defense. And obviously, since I'm not talking about the linebackers, what I'm going to say, I guess, is that Notre Dame's nickel package has to be better this year. And I think the move of moving Avery Davis from, quarterback turned running back turned cornerback is an interesting one. He's a guy I think that if you've listened to what some of the Notre Dame reporters have said about the Notre Dame defense, he's a guy that could play at the nickel, with Houston Griffith moving to boundary corner, Troy Pride staying towards the field. Notre Dame's just got to figure out who plays that nickel position. And if it's Avery Davis, it's Avery Davis. If it's Sean Crawford coming back off of a couple major injuries, that gives me some pause, and I have my doubts about that. But if it's Sean Crawford, it's Sean Crawford. Or if it's somebody else that I'm not talking about, it's somebody else. But the bottom line is I think Notre Dame has to be better in the defensive secondary on third down to go into a place like Georgia and win on the road. You're going to have to stop them on 3rd and 4. You're going to have to stop them on, the 3rd and 7. So you're going to have guys in the defensive backfield to let guys like Okwara and Dalen Hayes and Khalid Kareem, get after the quarterback. So those are the guys I think, Notre Dame's got to figure out that defensive package, that nickel defensive package, to be able to be a real good football team this year, I think. And that's kind of where I think a lot of Notre Dame's success is going to lie. So it's going to come down to third downs quite a bit for Notre Dame. I have a feeling on both sides of the ball. And like I say, I just think that Avery Davis or whoever it ends up being at that nickel position has to play well for Notre Dame to have the same type of success. So,
yeah, I agree for the most part.
Go ahead.
I just want to add something real quick. Because there's not guys that are sort of paper over the cracks, guys like Tavon Coney and Drew Tranquil that will help you through those kind of situations. Notre Dame, as you said, it's really going to be reliant on getting through or converting on third downs, as well as stopping teams on third downs. That's going to be really key when you don't have supremely athletic guys like that, like really experienced guys like Coney and Tranquil.
Absolutely. And I think, and like I say, we've talked mostly defense heavy at this point, but the part of this I think that we're leaving out is that Notre Dame, I think, has a better offense. We'll have a better offense from day one. An offense that, Chip Long has said, he's been vocal about the fact that he, as an offensive coordinator, was embarrassed at the lack of big plays that they were able to produce last year. I think they're going to have playmakers that are more comfortable in their spots, even missing Miles Boykin and Dexter Williams, who were their two best big play guys. I think they're going to find some big plays in that offense. And whereas Notre Dame leaned on their defense to win games against, Ball State and Vanderbilt early on last year while they got things figured out with the offense to a certain degree, I think it could be the opposite this year, where the offense carries the day and they score 52 points in week 1 against Louisville and give up 27 or something like that, kind of like, along the lines of that Wake Forest game last year. So, that's a possibility as well. And it's enough, I think, to give me and hopefully other Notre Dame fans hope moving in to the future. So we're going to transition a little bit, but before we do, want to talk about one more sponsorship that we have at the Under the Dome podcast. We're excited to partner with the 26 Shirts again for the month of April. 26 Shirts sells cool t-shirts backed by an even cooler mission, which is helping people in need. So every 2 weeks, they offer an exclusive t-shirt for $25, and a portion of the proceeds from each sale goes to help a person or family in need or an organization heavily involved in community outreach. So the artists who provide the designs, they receive a percentage of the t-shirt, and then a life is impacted, and you get a limited edition sports-themed t-shirt that will go into the 26 shirt vault, never to be printed again. So if you're into having stuff that other people don't, 26shirts.com is kind of the place for you to go. So like I said, portions of those proceeds from the sales go to these shirts to help a person in serious financial needs due to generally overwhelming medical bills. So you can read more about this particular cause on the website. Thank you to 26 Shirts for sponsoring the podcast, and make sure you check out 26shirts.com to order your shirt and help a worthy cause. So, Mason, I understand that you came to the podcast tonight armed and ready with a bevy of questions from some of your colleagues. So if you want to start kind of rattling some of those off, we can address those, and then we'll kind of get out of here then.
Yeah. So once we started planning this podcast, I reached out to a couple of my good friends, a couple guys that write for Cover Notre Dame as well. That I asked them if they wanted to put any questions out here for us and just get our thoughts on them. So this first one comes from my buddy from Western Michigan, Andy Schuring 32 on Twitter. What is Notre Dame's biggest change from last year? And I really like this question because it's very vague in that it can be interpreted in many ways. What is Notre Dame's biggest change from last year? I'd let you answer that.
I think the biggest change is going to be the receiving core. And what I mean by that, I think Notre Dame, they're going to look the same defensively. They're going to do a lot of the same things, and certainly they're going to be different guys in different positions. But I think the difference is, if we think back to spring practice last year and talking about who was going to step up for Notre Dame in the receiving core, we were talking about Miles Boykin and how he played in the Citrus Bowl, and we were talking about Chase Claypool and whether he could break out, and to a large extent, that's still a story. And then we were talking about, Chris Fink and that type of thing, and Alizé Mack, and we were talking about how big, with the exception of Fink, obviously, how big and, physically imposing the wide receiver core is. Well, it's a different type of a wide receiver core, I think, this year. And I think that that's going to come from, guys like Kevin Austin, more of a speed type guy if he can kind of figure things out, or Lawrence Keys or Braden Lenzy or those types of guys. I think, so those guys are not big guys, but they have a level of speed, I think, that Notre Dame, hasn't experienced in their receiving core in a while. And I think that's going to make the offense look a lot different. I think the potential for big plays and things are there. And I just, overall, I just think that, that's going to be the biggest difference when you watch Notre Dame. They're just going to have a lot of different guys stretching the field and that type of thing that they didn't necessarily have next year. So what say you?
So I agree totally on that, actually, because it's going to be more exciting to see the Notre Dame offense this year. Finally, we're kind of getting away from the jump ball. The past couple of years been that era of go up and get it, the Miles Boykin and Chase Claypools of the world. And I'm really excited to see what Michael Young and Kevin Austin can do. Initial reports about Kevin Austin weren't all that great, but this past couple weeks or two, he seems to have turned it on. Interestingly, probably not coincidentally, right after an article I wrote about him, kind of chewing him out. Maybe you read it, maybe you didn't. So I'm really expecting a big year from him and Michael Young as well. I really like Jafar Armstrong at the running back position. That's a big change. Losing a guy like Dexter Williams, who's one of the best running backs in the nation, undoubtedly. I'm excited to see what Jafar Armstrong and Tony Jones can do as a 1-2 punch, as well as the change in who's going to be the third string running back. It was nice to rely on a guy like Tony Jones Jr. to be the third running back, but who's going to emerge as the third running back? Is it Jameer Smith? Is it Kyron Williams? Or is it Sebo Flemister? All three we've heard great things from at practice. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think ultimately you're seeing a lot of big changes on offense and defense, but really you're seeing the biggest change in the skill playmaking positions.
Yeah, and if I could add just real quick before we get to the next question.
Yeah, go for it.
To your point, people who have watched Notre Dame practice, and obviously you and I are not necessarily privy to this information, but I've heard reporters and people say that number one, Kevin Austin has put together probably in the last week or two, put together his 2 best practices pretty much ever for Notre Dame. So that's, I guess, interesting and exciting information. And 2, it seems from what I've heard, and I think this is interesting because Nathan Erbach, after the Cotton Bowl drumming last year, had an interesting thought about, will Phil Yurkovich be able to push Ian Book at all? Because, Ian Book, for as good and accurate of a quarterback that he was, didn't throw the deep ball real well, and it allowed a team like Clemson to just not be stretched and take away the underneath stuff and sit on the run game and that type of thing. I think that, from what I've heard, it sounds like Ian Book is throwing the deep ball a little bit better. I think some of his problems were, number one, I think a lot of the chemistry that's developed between quarterback and receiver is done in spring ball and even outside of like the actual practice, I suppose, where guys get together and they work out together and that type of thing. And I think knowing that Ian Book is the quarterback coming in and knowing that he's going to, unless something terrible happens like an injury or whatever, that he's going to be the starter, I think that that chemistry with his receivers is going to be better as well. So I think we're going to see some more deep balls from Notre Dame to guys like, Braden Lenzy, Lawrence Keys, these guys that, you can keep them fresh and you can send them deep on nearly every play and that type of thing. And if, they get behind the coverage, then obviously that's a good thing for Notre Dame. So, I guess that wasn't real quick. I said it was going to be real quick, but it wasn't. So, anyway, if you have more to add to that, you can, or if not, we can go to the next one.
Yeah, we're going to move on to the next one. This is the second of 3. This comes from A. McKins on Twitter, at A. McKins. Who is a team outside of Michigan, Georgia, Stanford, etc., that Notre Dame will struggle with this season? Notre Dame struggled with teams like my current school, Ball State,
Right.
and Vanderbilt last year. You saw them almost lose to both schools. Who do you see Notre Dame struggling with this year?
Do you want to go first so I don't steal your thunder this time?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
So I really see Notre Dame struggling with both Virginia and Virginia Tech, as well as the trap game at Duke. Duke has never been a great football team. Obviously, they've been known as a basketball team for seemingly forever. But with the way the schedule is laid out and with the positioning of Duke in the Notre Dame schedule, it could be very easily for a team that's not even that great of a team like Duke to really give Notre Dame more of a challenge than they probably normally would. Notre Dame comes in to play at Duke after playing USC, a bye week, Michigan, and then Virginia Tech, two very tough games, and especially at Michigan. And then you play Duke, and then, of course, your guys are already looking forward to Navy, as the triple option isn't something you can teach freshmen in less than a week. So I think Duke is a very dangerous game, but I also could be wrong because Duke is perennially a horrible team. So Notre Dame could win by 40, or they could lose by 15 or 20. That's gonna be a tough game. So I'm curious to see what you think.
Yeah, so to kind of just talk about, and I agree with you, I think Virginia Tech and Duke are both, good picks. I think, so Notre Dame starts at Louisville. Don't really think they'll have much difficulty there. Louisville's football program is in a state of flux. So I think they'll win that one. They get that off week. I don't think it'll be New Mexico, and then Georgia is Georgia. We talked about that. That's not really what you could call a trap game. But then, the potential letdown against Virginia the week after Georgia, I think is one that you kind of hit the nail on the head. Bowling Green, I mean, it's right before USC comes in the middle of October there. So if you're looking ahead to USC, that Bowling Green game kind of sticks out a little bit after, what hopefully is maybe a easy game against Virginia, although I don't know. It's kind of funny that this question gets asked because you look at Notre Dame and you look at all of it. We do this every year, right? We talk about the big games, and then it's really the games in between those are the ones obviously that you're talking about. But the one though that I have to sort of zero in on, and you always kind of look to the game before and or after Navy. One game that I guess has me a little bit anxious is Boston College. So you've played Navy the week before on November 16th, as I have the Notre Dame schedule right in front of me. And then, depending on how the season's gone, theoretically, you could be 9-1 at that point if you are able to, I mean, with maybe a loss to Georgia or Michigan kind of in there, I think Notre Dame will beat USC, especially at home. So you could be 9-1 right there after that Navy game, and then be looking ahead to, November 30th, the Saturday after Thanksgiving at Stanford, as a game that could get you into the college football playoff, and you could forget about Boston College on November 23rd. You know the type of team Boston College is going to be. They're going to play good defense. They're going to run the ball. They're going to try to shorten the game. It's going to be senior day. It's going to be cold. So that game, I think, is one that Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame should. I mean, every game is important because Notre Dame probably has to go 12-0. But I mean, if there was a season they're going to go 11-1 and get in, I'd say it's this one because I mean, Georgia, Michigan, and Stanford are going to be good, we think. So I don't know. That game, for a lot of reasons, to me, is a game that gives me a little bit of pause.
I would agree about Boston College as well. They're a team that's going to beat you up. They're such a physical team. As you said, they play good defense, and they run the ball so much that it shortens your possessions. And if Notre Dame relies on the big hitter this year rather than like periodically driving nickel and diamond up and down the field, then that could be a tough game if Notre Dame can't get anything going offensively.
And Boston College always comes in with a chip on their shoulder because, there's that rivalry that Notre Dame thinks Boston College is the Notre Dame rejects. If you can't get into Notre Dame, you go to Boston College type of a situation. So
right.
They've got that going for them too.
All right, our third and final question comes from Giovanni7. Who is one player you expect to break out this fall? One on offense and one on defense.
Good question. I think that this is the year for Chase Claypool. I think that he will have a Miles Boykin-esque type season because I think I think he's a different receiver than Miles Boykin was. He's got a different level of athleticism. Miles Boykin, we saw him at the Combine. He's a physical specimen. He's big, he's fast, and all that stuff. I think Chase Claypool is going to be a little bit less physical and a little bit more of a finesse receiver. But I think, and if it's not this year with Chase Claypool, he doesn't have another one. This is his last year of eligibility. So I think this senior year as the number one guy, he's going to be able to step in and do what we've kind of hoped he would be able to do since kind of day one, since he arrived on campus. So I think this is the year for him. And defensively, there's so many good players on defense that it's hard to pick out who's going to be the breakout guy. I think getting Houston Griffith to the right position, which is that boundary corner, is going to be good for him. I think that might be the position that he's better at. He played kind of at the nickel inside, and that presents its own challenges, especially as a freshman. But I think now with a year under his belt, moving him outside as a true corner, so he's not really playing like he's a corner now. Like there was speculation, is he a safety, is he a corner? He's a corner now. He's going to find a home there, and I think he's going to have a really good year.
I like both of those picks. Who I'm looking at as a breakout guy, I've always been huge on Cole Kmet, the junior tight end. With Eliza Mack finally gone, I was never big on Mack, but I am very big on Kmet. I think he's going to have a great season this year. I've always drawn comparisons to Tyler Eifert and Kyle Rudolph personally, and Notre Dame is known for being a tight end. It's about time that they have a big, strong tight end that can go up and get the ball and really be a threat in the end zone, as Mack really was not, other than one game. I see Kmet getting 5 or 7 touchdowns this year. Book has shown a tendency to throw to the tight end. Kmet has great hands, and with him focusing strictly on football now, I think that's great for not only him, but for Notre Dame football and for Notre Dame coaches as well. And then looking towards the defensive side, it's hard to pick one. I'm looking at the depth chart right now to narrow down just to one guy that I want to pick. I'm going to say Kyle Hamilton at the safety position. He's a 5-star recruit. Notre Dame's not the kind of school to get a ton of 5-star recruits, and I really see him breaking through it. He's going to be a guy that's tough to keep off the field. I'm curious what you think about both of those guys.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if Notre Dame dives all in on Kyle Hamilton or if they try to save him for a year or if he plays a little bit on special teams early and then see if he can get in the rotation. I'd love to see Kyle Hamilton play because, as our buddy Nathan always says, like this is, defensively, like Kyle Hamilton's the best athlete that Notre Dame has landed as a defense, well, even as a recruit in general since Jalen Smith, as Nathan likes to say, and I like that kind of comparison. Obviously, different positions and that type of thing, but I don't know. We'll see if they put Kyle Smith on the field. I think, as, spring practice kind of comes to its conclusion and, when we get to watch the spring game, we'll see how Kyle Hamilton's being used because, could you use Kyle Hamilton as a safety? Could you play him at the Rover for a year? That all of that type of stuff could be, an interesting storyline, I think. And then on offense, I don't know. I'm going to wait and see about Cole Kmet, I suppose. For me, the tight end position at Notre Dame has been, I don't know, somewhat of an enigma to a certain extent. Like you kind of just don't like Alize Max making a great catch one play and missing a block and not seeing the field for the next 3 snaps the next. And I don't know. I think this is clearly Cole Kmet's job. I don't think Brock Wright is in the same stratosphere as Cole Kmet as far as athleticism and potential is concerned. I like that pick, but I guess I'm just kind of at a I'll believe it when I see it type of a thing, and maybe I'll see it sooner rather than later. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know why. I can't really pinpoint why I've always been high on Kmet, actually since he committed. And now that he's really focusing on just one sport and not missing time with the baseball team, I really feel like this could be easier to break out. And if so, we could see him head towards the NFL draft and be a top 5 rounds pick, maybe?
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Eifert went in the first, right? He
yeah,
went,
21st pick, I believe.
I thought. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, like I say, it's hard for me to say that right now. He certainly has the potential to do that. I don't know. The coaching staff, and I think this is kind of what you're getting at. The coaching staff seems to just be super duper high on him. It's just that I haven't seen it yet. But I mean, the coaching staff's around him every day. He seems like the type of guy that, has the mentality to be a leader and and do those types of things and be what you want at a Notre Dame tight end. I mean, and every once in a while, like you see a clip from practice and things, a great catch, that type of thing. So yeah, I think that's a really solid pick for a breakout offensive performer on that side of the ball. So I guess we will see. And if all of this stuff happens, like we say it will, then we'll be sitting here in, let's see, it's April 1st. We'll be sitting here in, like 8 months talking about, is Notre Dame making the college football playoff on December 1st? So we'll see. But anyway, I think that kind of brings us to our conclusion. It is, 8:55 p.m. Eastern on Monday, April 1st. The Notre Dame women's basketball team tips off in about 5 minutes, give or take. So we're going to get off so that we can watch that and root on the Lady Irish as they face Stanford for a trip to the Final Four. So exciting things happen with Notre Dame sports. I don't know if I should say this or not. I haven't talked to Jordan about this, but probably something that's going to come up for the Under the Dome podcast in the next week is that we'll have Jordan Small, who writes over at Slap the Sign about the Notre Dame women's basketball team, looking to get her on and talk about the Final Four should Notre Dame capitalize on the opportunity that they have tonight. So something to just, if you're listening, to be aware of. So thank you to all of our listeners, those that come back regularly, those that have come to us for the first time. Like I say, we're all over the web. Anywhere you could find a podcast, you will find the Under the Dome podcast, whether that's Google Podcasts now, which is apparently a thing. I think they're kind of starting to copy Apple a little bit. Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, all of that stuff. And as I always say, if I'm not somewhere with the podcast that you want the podcast to be, I'll put it there. So that goes for iHeartRadio, Spotify, all of that stuff. It's everywhere, I promise you. Make sure you check out the YouTube channel as well. We're going to do more than just podcasts over there. We're going to use that for a lot of live content, especially during the season and when breaking quick reaction things are necessitated. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, Under the Dome. You can just search that on YouTube, or you can go to my Twitter and find the links in that there as well. And like I say, thank you for everyone that comes back on a regular basis. Spread the words. We really appreciate all of the things that you do to help grow this podcast. Should be a fun season. We'll be back soon with more Notre Dame football talk, as well as some other stuff as well. And Mason, before I leave, obviously I should thank you for joining me. You guys will be hearing Mason on the line regularly. So Mason, thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to more podcasts and more Notre Dame football talk.
Absolutely. So thanks for listening, and until next time, go Irish.